And welcome back to the Sports Fix on this Tuesday, our second edition. We're still getting used to it. We're still working all the bugs out, but we're having lots of fun because we love sport, and we know, folks, you love sport. And one of the guys that we talk about sport with every week, he's also on the Flow Sports Show. He loves his basketball, but he also loves other things. So I'm joined by Dan Crouch, or as we call him, Dan the basketball man. G'day, Dan. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Clayton. I'm very well, thanks, and you're spot on. We certainly do love our sport.
We certainly do. There is no argument there. But I wanted to ask you about this because you love your basketball. This is a kind of a basketball story that, but it starts with a soccer player. One of the guys from AC Milan, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He sort of had a bit of a crack at LeBron James about his political activism and basically saying, do what you're good at and stay out of politics. What's your thoughts? Do you agree with this? Do you think Zlatan has sort of stepped over the line here? And I know LeBron's come back at him, but what do you think, mate? Tell us.
It's certainly an interesting debate, the whole should politics be in or out of sport. And I understand the viewpoint of people who say they should be kept completely separate and that sport is their escape from the real world and from essentially all the politics of the real world. But in my opinion, politics does have a place in sport, and I think it's great when world-class athletes like LeBron James speak out on political issues and try and use their status to help people who aren't as fortunate. So a little disappointing to see Zlatan Ibrahimovic saying this, because the work that LeBron James has done off the court with his activism and by being a political voice in the NBA has just been remarkable. So I certainly understand Zlatan's viewpoint, but I'm certainly on Team LeBron here. I think politics do have a place in sport, and I love to hear athletes speaking out against social issues and whatnot.
Well, LeBron has said that, and I quote, "I will never shut up." And he does it. And I think you hit on a point there that I find it's sort of... it really undermines Zlatan's his argument, is the fact that LeBron does a lot of stuff off the court for his local community, and a lot of it he does without fanfare. He doesn't do it for any publicity. He does it because that's what he believes in, and that sort of then stems into his political views and what he thinks and about how kids should be educated and what we should be doing in society. So I think he's kind of missed the mark there, but athletes, they're always going to have their political views. We can't stop them. There is this freedom of speech thing. But sometimes I think it would be nice if they were a little quiet.
Yeah, definitely. There's certainly an element of that. And, you touched on LeBron James and everything he's done there. And the big one, of course, is he's opened the I Promise school in, I believe, in his hometown of Akron, Ohio, where he's, paying for hundreds of kids' tuition and their textbooks and getting them to college and all that sort of stuff. And it's undoubtedly good. And it does stem from his attitude in the media and his willingness to speak up on issues. And the big one, of course, in America is racism. And we saw that really explode last year, and especially in the NBA, who were kind of the leaders in activism there. I wonder whether or not Zlatan Ibrahimovic, being that he's not from the United States of America, has a full understanding of how intense it is there. And I think we see it a lot in Australia as well, where people, they speak on American racial issues. But the reality is, LeBron James, being a black man, even one in a huge position of power and privilege, still understands that struggle, and he's speaking on behalf of his people. And I think it would be a real tragedy if that's something that was lost from sport. I think it's fantastic to see that, and I hope we see more of it.
I totally agree with you on that point as well, and what LeBron's doing. I mean, I don't understand what he grew up with and what he encountered every day, but I will defer to his judgment and his opinion on it, and I'm open to hearing what he's got to say, and if he believes it needs to be this way to try and correct it, then I'll understand that and I'll take that on board. The thing that annoys me a bit with some of these comments and the to's and fro's going back a bit with it is that I kind of wonder what is really the agenda item here. Is it really to have a go at LeBron, or is it basically that Zlatan wants to boost his profile a bit and it gets him in the media cycle for a few days and that? So what's your thoughts on that as well, that sometimes these sports athletes, that when they do this, their real agenda is to boost their profile, to get followers or whatever, rather than really get into what is at the core issue of what LeBron is really talking about with his political activism?
Oh yeah, I think there's certainly an element of that. I think there's a lot of athletes on both sides of this debate who probably voice their opinion for a little bit of clout and recognition rather than actually caring about the issue they're speaking about. And I must say, I find it quite funny. You hear people like Zlatan Ibrahimovic say politics should stay out of sports, and essentially when they're doing that, they're actually just taking the other side of politics in sport and saying, don't stand up for what you believe in. Don't be, on the progressive side of politics. Stay on the conservative side. You're an athlete. You don't have the right to be a public political voice. When, I just think it's quite funny how a lot of people who are against that are actually taking the side of politics themselves in the process.
Do you think there is ever going to be a time when we could try and have politics not in sport, or you think the two go hand in hand together and will always be that way?
I think it will just always be that way, that they go hand in hand together. I mean, you look at, we're discussing the NBA, it's a mostly African-American league in a country that is systemically racist towards African-Americans. You look at the AFL here, there's some of our most talented players are of Indigenous heritage, and we see time and time again them getting targeted by fans, and even the Eddie Maguire, Adam Goods debacle. It just isn't something that we can avoid in sport, unfortunately. And I'm sure if it was up to Adam Goods and LeBron James, they would love to be silent on the matter, but the reality is their people are facing oppression, and they don't have that luxury of staying silent.
I even think about when I was young and playing soccer in Adelaide, and I was playing for a team that was a lot of Italians, and I loved playing with them, and mainly because at the end of the game, the food that we used to have was absolutely sensational. But there was other teams from other different backgrounds, and when you'd go to their ground, you had to be careful. You couldn't be on your own, and I'm thinking that's going back when I was a kid. So it's been in all sports. Just the races and just the nationalities against each other. It's sad that it's still there, and I kind of think that it would be nice if we didn't have to deal with it, but it's something that's going to be facing sport for a long time. Yeah,
definitely. It's something that a lot of kids have to deal with growing up playing sport, and I'm sure it puts a lot of kids completely off the idea of playing sport and mixing with other races of people who are maybe racist towards them. And for that reason, I think it's fantastic to have leaders like LeBron James speaking up, trying to make a change and trying to make it fair for everyone. And of course, when we talk about politics in sport, it's not just a matter of racial issues. It's all sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's all politics. It's bad policies. It's just everything. And it's really good to have leadership and voices from outside, in our case, outside Parliament House, because we all know that you can't exactly trust a lot of politicians, perfectly. So it is good to have some alternative voices, and some people might just call them, fake woke or whatever. But the reality is a lot of these athletes are very well educated on these issues, and they go out of their way to learn more and more. So I think for the most part, they are really voices worth listening to.
I can just, as you were talking then, and you were reminding me of a couple of prime ministers this country has had trouble batting and bowling. So we'd like to keep them. We don't want to leave it to them because we know what will happen though.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Dan, you're going to be on the Sports Show again this week talking about the NBL and the NBA. LeBron's been doing all right at the moment, has he?
He's been going okay. He's had a bit of a bad stretch since Anthony Davis got injured, and he's been carrying the load for the Lakers, but they're starting to get a few of their role players back in, and I think he's better for it. Obviously, he's 36 years old, 18th year in the league, playing major minutes after a short off-season, so you can't expect perfection, but he's certainly bouncing back from the little slump he was in a couple of weeks ago.
And is our Boomer squad looking okay if the Tokyo Olympics go ahead?
Yes, it is. It's looking like the strongest squad we've ever had, and this is our best chance ever to claim a medal in the basketball. So fingers crossed. Of course, that's only in the men's. Of course, the women's have claimed a few medals in the basketball before. They've been a bit of a powerhouse, but we'd love to see the men follow suit and claim their first medal this year.
All right, I'm going to get you to give me a tip early. Where do you think the Boomers and the Opals, what colour medal will they get?
I think the Opals are going to be looking at a silver. I don't think they'll be good enough to topple the Americans, but I think they're certainly in a good position to take home the silver. And as for the men, same deal. I don't think they're good enough to beat the Americans, so they could come home with a silver, but it will depend on if they're on the other side of the draw to the Americans. If they have to play them early and get knocked out, they might suffer. But realistically, I think they'll go in with, along with Serbia and Spain, probably the second best team in the Olympics.
Okay, I've written them down here, so we've got you March the 2nd. We've got your call early, so we'll see where you end up.
Sounds good.
All right, Dan, I'm sure the guys will be looking forward to chatting to you on Friday. Thanks so much for chatting to me today, and we'll look forward to catching up again.
No worries, Clayton. Thanks, mate.